Welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name is Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is episode 419, and it is a director's episode!
Hey.
Question of the week. What game was the first that you broke through 100 hours of gameplay?
League of Legends.
No way.
Probably not.
It was that late in your gaming
Probably
career?
not, but, you know, some of those early games didn't keep track as well as PCs do.
Sure.
Well, sure, but just because it doesn't tell you made it to 100
You're right.
doesn't mean you didn't make
In
it
that
past
case,
100.
it's Mario 64, for sure.
You think you put in 100 hours
Oh.
because also some of those earlier games don't require or expect that much out of you.
Right,
So,
but I was a kid, and
But you revisit them.
I got
that would be
yeah,
full
you got
complete.
summer break,
I got
and you got nothing to
stuck
do.
on games so much as a kid and bashed my head against the wall, but, like, kept playing. And I was trying to get all the stars in Mario 64. I put in way more than 100 hours in that game.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
solid answer.
That wouldn't surprise me. My knee-jerk reaction was to say StarCraft.
That's
Because
probably true.
Easily.
That
Or
late
Sith.
goodness, Kenny.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I think but no, the more I thought about it, I think there's games before that I hit 100 hours on. I probably hit 100 hours on Final Fantasy VII. I probably hit 100 hours on Super Mario Brothers 3, honestly.
100
Played
hours
so much
on
of
that?
game. Yeah, I may have hit 100 hours on the original Final Fantasy. Like, there's so many games. You say 100 hours like it's this crazy threshold. I feel like the majority of games, like real games that I truly like get into playing, I feel like I hit that mark like all the time.
Really?
I don't play a game unless it's gonna like be something to
Ruin
really
your life.
keep my attention. Outside of like our weekly games that are like, you know, like snippets. But if I fall into a game, I fall into it hard.
So for me, outside of Final Fantasies, and I'm setting that aside because I think probably at least for 7 and 10, I put in over 100 hours through a few different gameplays. I remember.
Yeah, not one gameplay, but like over the history of the game. That's the question.
I think my largest one file time spent in Final Fantasy VII, like I distinctly remember and have a picture of the save file in my head, was like 83 hours, 82 hours. So like,
don't they max out at like 99.99? So you can't really tell on some of those old games.
I don't think I got that high. But
I think they do.
Besides Final Fantasies, I think that probably it was World of Warcraft for me in college. That was the first game that I know-lifed, really.
Yeah. That's probably a lot of people's answer. Because it demanded
that was so late in your life is weird to me.
Besides Final Fantasies, 100
wasn't a power gamer
was
yet.
a lot. I think it was and it is again for me. There was a time in my life where it wasn't a lot, but that was a window
This
of
is
the
the best
past.
times.
And the
that we'll
worst.
never
It
ever
never,
have
it
again.
never has been. If you're not getting 100 hours out of a game, don't even pick it up.
Wow. Okay, for fun, how many hours do you think you have in League of Legends, Kenny?
I don't know. I think I have more than either of you guys, though.
You probably do.
It's probably disgusting.
You fell back in one point when I didn't.
Yeah.
A little bit.
But I didn't go hard.
Yeah.
I think I've got more.
But a lot.
I think I've got more hours in Rocket League than I do in League of Legends.
No, you don't. Think about it. How many games you played of League and how long they are each.
And how long those matches are.
You'd only have to
That's why
play
I
like
hate it.
150 games to break 100 hours.
Over 100 hours is dedication, but if you want the best ending, go for 108. Like in our retro game of the week, Suikoden II.
Overview.
First things first, we'd like to welcome Justified to the show, our newest director and the one responsible for this particular episode. Justified, would you just take a moment, introduce yourself to us and our community? Let us know how you found out about New Game Plus, how long you've been a part of the community, and why you chose, out of all other games, Suikoden II.
Absolutely, guys. My name's Justified. I came across the podcast a couple years ago during the pandemic. I was searching for some of my favorite niche RPGs of all time, and I came across you guys because you did a review of a game called Tactics Ogre, which I love. I do not think you gave it New Game Plus, but that's fine.
I don't think we did either. Sorry for the broken heart.
No worries, no worries. But I do love listening to you guys. I listen to you guys a lot at work. I love listening to the podcasts. I love you guys making fun of each other. That's always very, very entertaining. And as far as, and I'm going to call it usually Suikoden because that's where I grew up. I don't think that's accurate, but it's a pretty weird game to pronounce. I'll do my best to call it, I think it's Suikoden, but I call it Suikoden a lot about habit. And my friends and I grew up in the Nintendo and Super Nintendo area, and we came across the game Chrono Trigger. And that was our first RPG experience, and it blew our minds, and we could not get our hands on enough RPGs. We eventually came across Final Fantasies 2 and 3, as we know was really 4 and 6. And we were just so excited for any RPG we could get our hands on. And then eventually when my friends got a copy of the first PlayStation 1, we knew Final Fantasy 7 was coming out, and my older brother came home and talked to me about this game, Suikoden or Suikoden 1, and we eventually rented that, my friend and I, and ever since I've been in love with this franchise. I play the whole franchise, or at least the main titles, and this one's my favorite, I think. And then if you ever look at IGN, they ranked this number 17 of the best RPGs of all time.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So you're an
That's
RPG
high
fan.
I
praise.
really wanted to expose you guys and the community to it.
Nice.
Yeah, I could do a secondary podcast where we just talked about JRPGs all the time. You've probably
I would
listened
go
long
insane.
enough at this point that you know that you put a JRPG in front of me and it's kind of a done deal.
Not all of them, though.
Not all of them.
Yeah,
There's been
Well,
some.
that's
there are
trademark.
some exceptions.
Yeah.
But there's some classics that need to be played.
Yeah, and I think the three of us, but I'll let Kenny and Nolan speak for themselves. I think the three of us. I'll let Kenny and Nolan speak for themselves. Me.
Say it again.
I have not experienced this series until this week, so this is new to me.
Same.
Yeah, same. Totally fair.
Oh no.
Yeah, you were allowed to speak for us this time.
I am. This episode will be interesting, and I want honesty all throughout it.
I'm
because-
ready to bring honesty.
Oh
Trust
no,
me.
I don't want honesty. I don't want honesty throughout it, because this was all of our first experience. But for you, Justified, your 100th experience. Have you put the question of the week today was about which game have you put in over 100 hours, and do you think in the variety and the number of times that you played this game, you've exceeded 100 hours?
Yes, because to beat the game, I don't know how far you guys got, but it's
No
40
spoilers?
hours tops. Did you beat it, Justin?
No spoilers is what I was saying. I just don't
Oh,
want.
no spoilers. It's about 30 to 40 hours tops, and yeah, I've beaten it at least 10 times. And the remasters of 1 and 2 are coming out. They're supposed to come out last year. They're gonna, I think, coming out this year, and I am.
Dang, that's hype.
That's hype.
There's
Yeah,
also,
that's so fun.
you might get into a little bit later, but there's a spiritual successor to the franchise that's coming out in the end of April. The creator he wanted to make a 6th game, and Konami said no, so he basically went out on his own and did it. The creator just
Cool.
died actually a few weeks ago, which is really unfortunate. But the game is still coming out at the end of April.
Well, Kenny, read the Wikipedia article for us on Suikoden 2.
You act like I don't have tons of original thoughts. Suikoden 2
He's like-
came out. We say as I immediately glance over to my reference screen of notes. Came out for the PlayStation 1 in late 90s. And is a Konami title, published and developed by Konami, and is, kind of their answer to the RPG craze of the day. This is a sequel, unsurprisingly, since it's got 2 in the name, and it's a story that takes place a few years after the events of the original Suikoden and includes some of those same characters. You find your unfortunately unnamed by default protagonist, but who we learn, kind of through lore and outside resourcing reasons, character's name, to be right in the middle of a terrible kind of tragedy. You and your best friend are in the middle of this youth army that is ambushed for political intrigue. And the story starts off pretty heavy. A bunch of your friends and colleagues die in front of you, and the people that you feel like you should trust have betrayed you.
It happened to me in college.
And like in all these games, that's just sort of the first domino. The world gets a lot bigger. You end up collecting runes and working towards stars of destiny. So a whole can of worms to be opened up there.
A Konami RPG is like a Honda pickup truck.
Ooh, that's great.
You know what I'm saying?
It
could be good.
I would 100% drive a Honda pickup truck.
Right, sure. Could be.
Nolan's
could be
not
good.
saying you can't, but he's saying that is outside
Unusual.
normal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying I would overtly go seek that out.
Well,
Well,
And-
they did their own. This was Konami's, and then Capcom did the same thing with the Breath of Fire franchise. So this was everyone
True.
kind of tackling
Yeah.
the RPG franchise of the success of Final Fantasy from Square.
You had
And-
to. It was a huge, like that
Yeah.
wave, man.
Well,
in the
big market,
and
absolutely.
and for good or bad, I believe this happened with Suikoden 1 as well with Final Fantasy 7, but the release of Suikoden 2 was a couple of months before Final Fantasy 8 or at least in Japan, but it was the same month in North America. So they came out at the same time, which I think I don't know if that was good for the franchise or for the series.
Back in the day, that's when I got it. I got both of those games at the same time. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even play Final Fantasy VIII for like a year or two, even though I got it when it came out, just because of
Wow.
Well, that's
I
the
love
thing.
that that's the game that got edged out for you.
Well-
that speaks highly to your preferences.
Everybody saw 7 and was like, holy, and then 8. So, of course, it outsold it, I'm sure. But then
Yeah.
they got it home and they're like, what is this?
Yeah,
and then they go pick up
you
Suikoden 2.
a different game for a different day. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Speaking of Final Fantasy, I do have one more question here. Justified. In Final Fantasy, although the numbers of the titles increase, Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, the games are not connected. The worlds are not connected. The stories are not connected. However, in Suikoden, they are more so. How much so did we need to have played 1 before we played 2? We can't change that now. How connected are they, and are they enough of a standalone title to do what we did?
Dustin, I'm glad you asked. I'm very excited to talk about this. So out of the main canon, so there's 5 main entries. There's some side titles, but I won't go into that. Out of the main ones, they are mostly very connected. This one's 3 years after 1, and a lot of the characters that are important characters from 1 will show up in this one. So a lot of them are like really exciting moments. So if you got early enough, and I will spoil this because it's only about 10 minutes in the game, you
Victor?
meet characters Victor and Flick. They're very important characters from the first game. 3 takes place, I believe, 15 years later in a different country. So some of those faces will show up, but not as many. 4 is like 150 years before. 4 is a bad game. I do not recommend anyone play 4. And then 5 is about 10 years before 1. So the characters we mentioned runes, but there's also these items called true runes, which are kind of, they talk about how like the earth or the world is created by them. And if you have a true rune, that character does not age. So some of these characters will show up 100 years later in a different game, and it's like, oh, I know that character because he has a true rune on, and the characters can still die. But yes, this one is the most fan friendly because a lot of the faces from 1 do show up in this game.
You sure?
I like that.
That's
One more
true
thing I want to
runes-
mention.
Yeah.
Especially, you may have noticed at the very beginning, the game asks if you want to load data from the first game. If you do that, and it's specifically if you got all the characters and you're in the final save spot before the final boss fight, and you load that save data, there is a side quest later on where you do have the opportunity to do the side quest and then recruit the main protagonist from the first game,
Interesting.
which I think
Nice.
was amazing, and especially for the late '90s. I don't know any other game that's ever done that before.
Yep, that's huge and like fan servicey and awesome. I gotta say, making your true rune holding characters not age is such a great thing to have in the
Yeah, it's clever.
story writers playbook.
Yeah.
They're like, we can use these characters and we can use them again and again and again
Without aging.
Well, they can sometimes
Right,
die
that's so
off.
smart for them.
They can sometimes die off, and then another character picks it up. The story continues. One more thing I
Yeah.
wanted to mention on the subject is some of these characters. Some of the characters you get from the story, you get them all. They're very important in the story, and a lot of them are just minor characters you can get just to try them out, right? Some of the minor characters from their earlier entries will show up in the later game in a pivotal role. Some cases, I won't name names, will show up as the main antagonist. The final boss fight in some of these games are actually a sub character from a previous game.
People that you'd already met. That's so fun.
Yeah.
Like tying your worlds together and people that you've had people care about and have opinions on, and then having them show up again. I love that move from these
And
writers.
it's not always a good versus evil. Sometimes it's just two different sides of war. So sometimes if someone who's an ally in one game ends up on the other
Yeah.
side of the fence on a future game, which I like that storytelling.
Gameplay.
So I did, on that last subject, I did put in here that Dustin was going to be mad that the game asked you to import data from the first game. Were you, Dustin, upset about that and thinking that you missed something? Because I was.
I did until I looked it up. And honestly, I'm kind of, disappointed that that is all that it does for you. That it's.
I mean, getting a primary character in a playable state is huge.
Did you hear?
I love that.
Did you hear what Justified said? You had to have
did.
100% completed the first game to get
Sure.
one side quest at the end of this game to
Right.
get one character. Yeah, it's cool, but they could have done more with that.
Yeah,
There is a little bit
I
more.
guess.
You get some of the returning characters have better stats, but I consider that pretty minor because as we get into
That's
gameplay,
minor.
characters level up very quickly.
So
It's
they
not like the
could've-
whole Mass Effect thing, which obviously they couldn't do at the time, where it's literally just you continue your entire playthrough.
Right. They could have done more. I'm glad they didn't because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
coming to the second game first. I'm glad that they didn't do more than that.
I didn't do the
You
first
pointed out
game. It's not as polished, and I just didn't. I wanted to introduce you guys to the best. I didn't want to get you to the first
Yeah.
one that's not as polished and then not be excited to play a future one.
Makes sense. No, it's fine.
Sequels are the best. No one's surprised by this fact. You mentioned how quickly characters level up. I think that's an important thing to talk about because it keeps grinding kind of to a minimum in this game. And the function of how that works is a little bit different here than in some titles. And I don't fully understand kind of the math behind it, but the concept is that you're different in level from the characters that you're fighting is the way that experience is calculated. So if you have a character that's way behind, they're going to sort of have a catch-up mechanic, and you're not going to be able to take a character and way grind them to being overpowered, because the further away you get from the level of the characters you're fighting, it sort of pulls them in. So it's sort of like a constraint that keeps everybody kind of in that same band and helps you level up those characters in a more friendly and quicker way, which I felt was different but really welcome
I
here.
think it's based off the dungeon.
It may be the level of the
you know,
dungeon
power
that
one
you're in, but
character
there's some
early
kind of
game. To level
Yeah,
30,
anchor.
but then later in the game, I think they can get to level 50. It's just because the enemies are tougher and whatnot. But the catch-up mechanic, they'll just fight a few battles with a new character and they'll catch up very quickly.
Well, and that mechanic is needed in this game, but
Yes.
because of a certain reason. But before that, you start the game and it feels like any other JRPG. In fact, it starts kind of slow, in my opinion. Kenny laid out the events that take place, but it's walk around, you have a party member, you do a couple dialogue things, and you have a turn-based battle. And so in the first moments of the game, it feels like, to me, any other JRPG. But there's a lot more that ends up going on in this game as you start to uncover things. But I do want to go over that first battle that they introduce you to. It is what you would expect. It's not ATB style. It's just you make your selections for your characters, and then you confirm it. Like that, I thought that was weird. And then you watch the events play out, and almost like a strategy game manner versus everybody takes a turn. And I thought that was kind of a very unintrusive change that they could make to the standard JRPG battle system that essentially makes it the same, but just kind of adds a little more. I don't know. It kind of sped things up a little bit, and there are multiple combat styles in this game, but the base one I thought was straightforward and worried me that that's all I was going to get out of this game.
I hated the confirmation dialogue.
Yeah, you did. I don't know why.
It felt completely unnecessary to me. Like, I've told all of my characters to do what they want to do. I wasn't joking. I can hit a back button like earlier as like a UI element to like go back if I am regretting decisions. So that second pop up of like, well, do you want us to do the things that you just said to do, kind of drove me crazy. But that's a small nitpick. I think the general vibe of the battles works and is interesting.
The thing that is more unique in this series, I think, compared to a few other contemporaries, is that you are in battles where your party is up to 6 players, 6 characters on your side. That's not immediate. You're just starting with 2, but very quickly you build up a party, and you'll often have up to 6 players that you're going through and choosing attack or defend or throw out an item or a unite ability, which we'll talk about shortly. And that does something new, along with it could have dragged down and slowed down the fights, but I think, Nolan, you alluded to it. It kind of happens simultaneously, not at all times, but if you've selected attack on a different, this is because your party is so large, the enemy party is often large too, and many of your characters will go out and do their damage or do their assignment that you gave them all simultaneously, so that it's more of it feels more of an active battle, and I liked that.
I did too. It's faster.
Well,
it's
yeah,
like
but it's also
life
flashy, and like the camera's doing things which we might talk about a little later in Aged, but like it's zooming up for critical hits, and it doesn't matter if you're like missing some of the actual information that it's giving you from off camera at that point, because it's like doing the rule of cool, not trying to give you all the numbers. It's just like doing crazy like slow-mo attacks or all of these other things. It's fun.
Where characters are like evading in the background and doing a counterattack, and you're like catching it like the left side of the screen while another character is like doing their thing. I find it
it's a bit more realistic in that sense too. Instead of like, all right, everybody, the enemy's gonna go, let's let them hit us.
Yeah, but if you strip it down, it is turn-based. Like it's all based on like a speed stat that the characters and the enemies have, and so like it's happening like a normal JRPG. The background is like a normal JRPG at the time, but what you're visualizing is a little bit flashier.
It's almost like round-based.
Round-based.
That's a great way to put it. Yep.
After that first encounter, which is unique in that style, you also get separated from your party member. And I'm like, okay, here we go. Because I think this week I experienced what Dustin experiences, the stress that comes along with him playing Fire Emblem games. I don't care in Fire Emblem. This game, Dustin made the 108 joke earlier. There are 100 characters that you can come across and recruit in this game.
108.
108. And for a JRPG, that's kind of insane. And so you're constantly being introduced to new characters, and they're not minor characters. They have designs, and they're party members, and you're either going to be excited by that, or that's going to be something that you struggle with because it happens so often in this game. But there's a reason for it, and I like that there's a reason for it. I like that they justified it with game mechanics and not just like, hey, here's a bunch of cool characters, have fun, or be stressed trying to pick your favorites. There's a reason. And so what did you guys think about that? I don't know any JRPG that throws that many characters at you.
I mean, you said Fire Emblem, and that's totally what I thought of.
Same. Yeah, sure.
And I know you say that and generally say that as a good thing. I'm not as big a fan of the overwhelming cast generally. But this one, it didn't feel as I don't know, as obtrusive. I felt like they did a good job of like weaving some of the characters in and introducing you to them and making you have a reason to, have relationship and bring them into your party. And so it felt more like a typical RPG where they just didn't put a cap on how many people they wanted you to have in your party, and less like a huge cast that they were just sort of like justifying. I don't know. Somehow they found a sweet spot in the middle for me, and it was interesting because I didn't expect to be hyped about it.
Now, one thing I want to mention, I don't know if you guys got an opportunity to get this far, but eventually you do get a base. And as the game goes on, more characters and story, the base grows and progresses. So there's 108 characters, but not all 108 characters are battle members or team. A lot of them are going to be like your item shopkeeper, your blacksmith, or just someone that doesn't really provide any value, but you can use a mini game on them, like your farmer or something along those lines as well.
Almost half of them are playable in battle. I think.
Usually,
I think the number is 40
or
so.
60 or so. 65 are combat team members, and the rest are support characters.
I do believe in this one 40 or maybe a little over 40. I don't know, somewhere between 40 and 60 something there are usable in combat. The rest, as you said, are at your base. I would imagine that the guys didn't get that far in the game. That's a considerable length into the game. I did, and to get to tether the absurd number of cast members to a story mechanical thing where it's not just fluff where you're meeting characters and recruiting them and it's just that's what's happening, but you're meeting them, recruiting them, and then building up an army, which you're kind of doing in Fire Emblem games. Like you're creating an army, and that's kind of what you're doing here. But then having a base for them, having purpose for them, and having the variety of characters. I was amazed. Like
I know
if in this game, and they're not all the same. You've got a few that are the battle Brit, like those kinds of guys, but then you've got an actual private investigator detective that shows up at a later time. That's like a gumshoes kind of guy with a trench coat and wide jaw and is going around. And actually later, I think once you recruit him, you're able to use him, and he's able to do go out and do detective work to give you clues on how you can find other party members from the 108 late in the
Nice.
world.
Wow.
You need him. You need him later because there's some characters that you're I don't know how to recruit this character, and he does give you those hints.
So, Justified, do you have a favorite character out of 108?
Ooh.
A great question.
I don't.
Yes.
Okay, who is it?
This
I probably
game
don't know.
does not get far enough. So it's also in these games too, especially this one. The farther you get into the game, I know you guys probably didn't get that opportunity.
Y'all keep saying that.
They get
Y'all don't know
cooler.
me.
They get more awesome looking. There's one character later in the game. In this game, he is just a random character you go talk to, and he'll join you, and then he becomes an important character in a later game. His name is George Prime. I just think that character, if you ever use him in your party, he's so overpowered.
What a name.
Another character, again, I'm butchering his pronunciation, but it's Prismagra or something along those lines. And he's got this super black armor and he yellow cape. And some of these characters allude to a lore that you don't really dive into this game, but in other franchises, they keep giving you more hints from the lore, almost hinting that eventually in one game they're going to dive into these characters. And this particular character has a relationship where he's hunting down one of the main villains of the game, and that relationship kind of continues on some of the franchise as well.
Nice. You said lore. Can we talk about the story a little bit more?
Yes.
Nolan, I agree with you. I think this game starts off slow, and I think that's a negative thing. You've got drama at the beginning, gravitas, with there's betrayal, the army, you're having to flee. So I think that some of that might be a little slow, but at least it gets things rolling. After that, though, is when it drags, and you're literally given chores to do.
Yes.
You are going around and scrubbing floors, pushing boxes into corners. You're now there's a story reason for it, you eventually find out, but it slows down. And then for the next many hours, you are going to a new location. It's being destroyed and burnt down and you're running to the next location, being destroyed and burnt down. I don't think that is bad, but it happens over and over again. I just think maybe some of the plotting or structure of the early game is a little bit slow for my taste.
Yeah, I felt that too. And another thing that kind of slowed it down for me, and maybe somebody would think this is a positive, this game has a lot more dialogue options than pick a JRPG. And like, you have multiple things to say to people, and you can exhaust options and talk with them for quite some time. And that's fine and impressive that they went through all the dialogue. But I think that also attributed to some of the slowness that I was feeling towards the beginning.
And it seemed like those dialogue options were resulting in different outcomes. That may have just been how they set it up. You may have landed on the same place. I couldn't tell either. I felt like I needed to get like further into the game to figure out if there were like consequences to these things a little bit more, or like replay it and try some things. But so yeah, I'm curious to hear if that's the case. Dustin, I will say I disagree on pacing. I felt like the prologue was really well done. Set up story interesting, got moving somewhat quickly, but without like being overbearing, and wasn't too long. I love how they started this game. Yeah, it gets a little slower like as you're early on and recruiting and kind of getting to know the world and your kind of early party, but I loved the pacing, at least very initially. I thought the prologue was handled with class.
Nolan, I'm going to say it again. I doubt you got this far, but there is a whole nother component to this game that I think started in Suikoden 1, and I hope that it gets more love and better in the games to come. But Nolan, there are segments that go straight up Fire Emblem tactical RPG where you're on the map and controlling a couple of units or unit representations and moving them into certain squares. That shocked me. Did not expect that. I think it makes sense in this world, but I think it left a lot to be desired, and I've done multiple of those so far, and you're only controlling, I think I've only been able to control two units at any given time and move one block at a time, so to even get into the battle is tough, and then there's not many fighting options. I love the idea, but I think the implementation isn't quite there yet, especially after playing Fire Emblem that nails some of that.
Spot on. I 100% agree with you. And like I said earlier, I'm glad they justified the large roster with gameplay. Not even lore reasons, not even, hey, here's a lot of options. There is a mode that utilizes the fact that there are so many characters that you want to play with.
Yeah.
Increases.
Frustrating though. They needed a straight up copy Fire Emblem.
Yeah.
I don't know if they had the space on the game to do so.
It's a PlayStation.
Yeah, but this game's big. I mean, I don't know, but it
add a disc.
It needed more. But I love the idea of having that in a game like this. It was a very pleasant surprise.
Each one of the games has there's three separate kind of gameplay mechanics. There's the turn-based, round-based we talked about, these large-scale battles. There's also individual duels, which you guys may have not gotten to. But
Nolan didn't, but I got to many of them.
Large-scale battles, each one of the games has kind of a different take on it. Some are better than others. I do agree with you guys. It's more of a story mechanic, because it's usually advancing the story, but the first several, you don't do anything. You're basically just watching. As the game goes on, you get more characters. You do control those battles. And the more cast of characters you have to recruit, and it allows you to have a bigger, better army that makes those battles a little bit easier as well.
Yeah. I just finished one where Ryu, by the way, is the protagonist, the hero. He brings out of the woods like a back attack on this army that is much larger than yours, and we're able to rout them and send them on their way. And when I come back to the base afterwards, like the streets are lined with soldiers that are cheering us on for winning that victory. So I do again, I referenced it with the 108 and the recruiting and stuff, but everything here is tethered. Like it doesn't feel like there's any component that's really out of line and just done to do it. They have story reasons for it and make it work, although I do feel like some of these individual components, like the tactical RPG thing, could have used some improvement for sure.
It's neat too that they have these characters. Each of them has different kind of relationships, and those end up having big plot implications and important sort of storytelling things. But they don't stop there. They also give you opportunities to explore your sort of character relationships as a battle mechanic. So you talked about it earlier, Dustin, but certain parts of your characters, if they're, you know, close friends, related, have history or whatever, will have this set of unite moves that let them do a sort of upgraded attack by working in tandem. And these come in a variety of different formats. I thought that was a pretty cool mechanic and a fun way of kind of integrating a diverse cast and also letting you see it in some cool battle kind of ways. I was curious y'all's thoughts on how they did that.
OP, so good.
Well, yeah, OP, especially at the beginning with Joey, not Joey.
Atreides?
And he did catch it. Joey Atreides and Ryu, they're able to do a buddy move that takes out that hits every enemy and is really overpowered for a good portion of the beginning of the game. But it does get to where like you're not able to use that as much anymore, and you have to diversify your attacks and abilities. But I love it. And how much cooler, how imagine this as a kid, if you were playing this without a guide, which I would never, and you're going into a new area, you find a character that looks different than the other town people, and then when you talk to them, gives you a little portrait, so you're like, there's something special here, and then you're able to figure out how to recruit them. You bring them into battle, and then you've got a new unite ability where they're able to partner up with another. Like, think about that. That would have scratched that part of your brain to be able to get those to find those characters, attain those characters, and then have a new fighting ability to use with those characters. That would be so much fun.
But it's TikTok.
That's why today you use a walkthrough.
But it's TikTok. Because
that's why today you use
it gives you brain rot, because imagine that 108 times, and you have to do the side quest with each one, which
sounds amazing.
Okay, so it sounds amazing to some.
You found it overwhelming.
Absolutely.
Just like too much, too deep, or too wide and not deep.
Yeah.
Were you using a guide?
Yeah, I was. And I realized too deep into it that the guide I was using is wanting me to get all 108 characters. It was the full thing. And I was like, well, I'm not going to use a different guide at this point. It's a good one. So I just kept going. But in a game where, okay, I don't like when my party members get taken away from me. So at the beginning when I lost my friend, I was like, dude, come on. Now I have to learn all and so making me pick my favorites. Final Fantasy 13 did this. I love that game, but they tear you away from characters all the time. So
I get that, but for a while, that's what happens here as you're getting new characters. But eventually, you get to a point where before you leave you're able to go back to your base and pick the team that you want to go out with you. But for story reasons, for a while, you might be introduced to people. They're with you for just an hour or so and they leave. Yeah. But they will be coming back eventually. But I do understand that, because Ryu, your main character, which they call a silent protagonist. What is a silent protagonist? Because you definitely choose dialogue options for him and he talks. So I don't know. But he doesn't have much character. So these other people that you're meeting are intriguing and interesting. And when they leave, I get that it hurts. But you get new ones in the next 5 minutes. So there's 108
what
of
if they're
them.
not
Yeah,
cool?
they're gonna cycle your cast.
They're all
in and
interesting.
out for sure.
They're all interesting. One other thing that I did want to mention in gameplay, I was getting some tonal whiplash here, and I would like to know what you think. It doesn't incredibly bother me. I'm fine with games having both levity and a severity to them, but like there was a scene relatively early on where there is a brutal whipping of children, of like teenagers, children. and it cuts to a sister breaking out and saying, "In the name of Grandpa Gengaku, here's the secret: golden bird, holy flower, dragon tooth, glory punch." And then she does something great. But like that's juxtaposed with a brutal scene that even the camera has to go off of for a little bit as the screen continually flashes red and you hear like
Justifies just laughing.
That's one example, but there are many times where like there is a serious like a girl's village gets burned down and her parents are gone, and then she goes mute for a long time. But that's set up right next to something super silly happening. Did anybody feel that? Did it bother you at all, or what were your thoughts there? Justified. What are your thoughts on the total?
I guess I've played the game so many times I don't even consider. I usually like more mature storytelling in my game, so I like it. But it's very. I mean, for those who haven't had the opportunity to play it, this is like a pixel game, so it's like when they do something more mature while the story is mature, it's not exactly graphic at the same time. It's very anime inspired, where one minute something silly's happening and the next minute something brutal's happening.
Totally anime.
I like them.
There's even some implications of some like adult kinds of interactions that happen relatively early in the game, but they just like walk off screen, like they just imply it, and it's fine.
It's a game rated.
Dustin, it didn't bother me. I like that it went heavy, and I think if you're gonna go heavy, the levity helps. Maybe it was too back and forth too quickly. They could have watched like some pacing there, but I was for it. I loved how they did storytelling here.
I please don't misunderstand me. I love the more serious themes too. I mean, Final Fantasy VII has some serious themes, and that's part of why I like it. It also has some levity, but it felt like it was going back and forth often, and that was the thing that I was just like, I noticed it. It didn't fully bother me, but I could see it bothering some people for sure.
We didn't play it, so I don't know, but I'm going to ask the question because I think I know the answer. Suikoden 1, the first title, similar in a lot of ways, but didn't have a run mechanic. Is that true?
Yeah.
A run mechanic.
There is, if memory serves me correctly, there is a rune you can equip. Now, we talked about runes being like more magic based, but not all runes are magic. Some of them are just gameplay mechanics, and some of them just help like
which is nice.
Stats. I think there's a rune that allows you to speed up. There's also a character, he's actually in this one as well. His name's Stallion. He's an elf with blue hair, and that character allows you to go super fast. I think so. If you have him party in the first game, then so there is a run mechanic, but it's not a default. You have to like.
It's not like a button and it's default. And I realized early on that this one had it. I always look for that in games like this because moving around the screen can be very, very slow. And if it doesn't have it as a default mechanic, I think it's a very strong argument for why people might enjoy the second one more than the first, just for like that pace of interaction. So
there's more animation going on too. So even though you run in the first game, you're really just walking fast. It's kind of silly.
Yeah. Aged.
Remember the year that this came out, right? 1998.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy VIII. Is being released. A lot of games, especially JRPGs, have already moved to 3D.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we know the early years of 3D and the problems that came along with that, and the sharp edges. We all cut ourselves on those growing up. But the developers of Suikoden II, or Suikoden series, decided we're not happy with the early adoption of 3D graphics, and so we're going to not do what everybody else is doing, and we're going to stay 2D. So here, you've got 2D at its latest. Obviously, games are still coming out some in 2D today, but you've got, in the era where everything's moving, you've got 2D, which allowed them, in my opinion, to do so much more than we had gotten with many 2D games and the graphics and the animations in the past.
I love a lot of the examples of this, of companies and game devs that decided to go 2D when 3D was becoming the standard. There are a few games that we've even played on the podcast. I think it's so smart, and I think you end up with a more polished overall game. Like, I don't want to imagine what this would look like if they tried to do full 3D. Maybe it'd be fine or passable, but I mean, someone might be mistaken this for a SNES game if you just glance at it. That's not a negative thing, I don't think. I think this looks great and plays great on the PS1, and I think it's because they went simple with it, and you have great pixel art here.
Well, in many ways, it ages better than the early 3D. So Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy VIII, and in some ways Final Fantasy IX even, there's some aging factors graphically there. Yeah. There's zero aging factors here.
Yeah, it future-proofs it because it's that sort of classic look already. And you guys both pointed it out, but it gave them so much room to add a ton of details in that style. I already was liking it. Like, I was enjoying the art style and the world and how immersive it felt and how many details they put in with things in the background and mist and all these things that you're seeing. But the moment that, like, blew me away, I know this is silly, but...
What if it's the same as mine?
Early on, you opened up a storeroom. You just have a storeroom where you go and store a bunch of your stuff. And the background of that scene looks so realistic, is so well done. They didn't have to, like, go crazy into the woods to make it feel like this immersive, like, look. It could have been phoned in. And I was just like, they went so hard into the thing that they did. And that's just one example. It was like the moment that stood out for me, but there were a ton of them. And so I'm in your camp. I'm so glad they stayed in this art style personally.
Well, the third game goes on PlayStation 2, and it does go to 3D. I just wanted to add that. I do think it works. But I think, keep in mind, the budget for this game was, I do not believe, nearly as strong as you would see with these Final Fantasy games at the time. So a lot of it, they might have just been working within the budget limitations, but
just limitations on what they could do.
Like Super Nintendo games are still popular today because they hold up graphically better than the early 3D era.
Yeah, it may have just been practical, but it still, I think, was for good regardless. And maybe that's, again, like nostalgia talking and us like looking and really liking that style, great. But it worked here.
And the thing that caught my attention was when Ryu is able to partner up with his sister Nanami during that scene in the back garden of their house. She tackle hugs him, first of all, and then when they're about to leave that area, she pushes him or opens it, I don't remember the exact thing, but into the wall, and then you see an indentation in the wall of where his body smacked. A few things. When people were doing 2D animation back in the day, they would create a sprite sheet, right, of here's some common expressions, and we'll use those 32 all throughout the game in a variety of different ways. Here, it seemed as though they were creating sprites for specific moments that wouldn't be used again. The dedication and the execution of that was remarkable and really brings life to the characters in the story.
Yeah, there are a lot of instances like that too. I feel like they took it like moment by moment, like you're saying, versus just like making it all at the beginning. I also think the character profiles, the portraits are the best in anything. Like, they're so good. And add to, I think that was so important to have in the game with these characters that you want to care about. You got to be able to see what they look like. You got to be able to see how cool they look, not just the pixel art. You got to see, so it adds to the personality. The part where I think the game lacks greatly, and I think it's fine that they did this in visuals, is the UI. Menus are fine, just text, just white text, whatever. But like when you're managing your party in the menu and you like the stats are like squished together, it's kind of hard to tell and read what's what. There's not a ton of icons going on. I think Final Fantasy nails that in this era with all the little icons that are representing your items and stuff. This was just text, and that's where I think it ages the most. But that's fine. I'd rather have that than the rest of the game suffer. The rest of the game still looks fantastic.
I think that
fully agree.
Yeah, completely fair on that. But animation, artwork, next level. Music, composed almost entirely. It's crazy. I think there's 100 or so tracks. I don't think there's 108, but there's right at 100 something. And I think all but like 4 of them was one composer, and she
Wow.
I think did a phenomenal job from the opening track that is like fully orchestrated. I think there's even a somewhat of a choir behind it, to village tracks, to the serious tone, to the battle themes. I don't think I think Final Fantasy does it better, but also they're like the top of
high
it.
budget. Yeah.
But I do think but I think that it works here, and none of them all of them were memorable, and ones that I would put on playlists, and ones that we probably have put on playlists.
Ones that we did, and I recognized in playing the game. It's on
cool.
our PlayStation podcast
awesome.
or playlist.
I think it's almost as good. I don't think it's as iconic.
Okay.
Something about how the Final Fantasy team does it. You have very memorable sort of, like hooks that stick. I don't know if this is as memorable, but when you're in the game and it's setting tone and you're just like playing it and it's trying to give you environment, it's top notch. It sounds great. They did an excellent job.
What did y'all think about the difficulty? I'm super curious as to what you thought. If it's something that to really enjoy it today, you need to play it with save states because it's too difficult, or it's maybe too much of a breeze. Any opinions on that?
I definitely don't think it's so the part that was noticeable is that this game doesn't allow you to save as often as other JRPGs that in this year, in this time.
Yeah.
And I think that will be felt by people. I don't care. I thought it was fine. I thought the difficulty felt fair, and the fact that you can, especially if you can figure out like those combinations in Unite, and then also we didn't go deep into the rune system, but I think there's like so much power in that system if you utilize it. So the save is the only thing I'll note about the difficulty being noticeable.
Good point. Someone else?
It didn't super bother me. Like it wasn't like too hard or too easy, I didn't think. I would imagine with games like this that are long, that tends to change some over time. Sometimes the difficulty will ramp, and that can be a good thing as the game gets, longer. I don't know that I got far enough in to really get a full picture of that, but the pieces that I played, it felt like they handled it relatively well.
Yeah, how does it scale like deeper into the game? Like, is it...
For me personally, there's only 1 or 2 boss fights that I thought were super tough. There's one boss fight that is a large part of the story where you actually have 3 groups, 6 team members, all fighting this boss at once.
Wow, that's cool.
Right. Yeah, and then you have to duel the boss. It's that I died. I remember when I first played this game like 5 or 6 times. And that I actually had to pre-grind my characters just to be strong enough to beat them.
Get them there.
Other than that, I don't recall any other particular strong boss fights, even in my first playthrough back in the 90s.
Yeah. I felt it was a little bit back and forth, meaning that the majority of the time is relatively easy, no additional grinding, which Kenny you referenced, but the bosses put up a pretty good challenge. But I think that's kind of how I want my JRPGs.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't want it to feel like I'm just steamrolling over everything. I want to have the threat of defeat and having to try again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a good thing that you get at least some of those moments.
I personally like it in games where it's enough where you want to level up your characters and have the best equipment and do what you can to kind of use that strategy. Because I like to use my brain to kind of like build that strategy and build up my characters, but not enough for throwing my controller at the TV and using inappropriate words.
Absolutely.
Can I say one other thing? I know it was referenced earlier, but I want to bring a little bit of clarity to this, and I think it's brilliant. With a combat group of around 40, 50, 60 different players by the end, you would think that things would be out-leveled, or your characters might be out-leveled. You'd have some, and then you would only want to use them because they're level 30 when you've got a new character that's level 6. Like, why would you even... But I think there's a brilliance here in a catch-up system, and I don't know the details behind it, but it's seriously 2 or 3 battles, normal battles, and your new character will be caught up level wise to the rest of your party. And I think that is brilliant because it then gives you so much ability to experiment with the characters you want to play with rather than just pushing some aside because they're so underleveled. I think that was so smart to do.
Yeah, we talked through that mechanic some, but I do think the best reason for it is your huge party.
Yeah,
it really helps. And you almost needed to do something like that. Yeah, and you can handle that in different ways. You can have the sort of, passive leveling up of your characters that aren't being used, and like different games handle it different ways. I think for this game and what it's trying to do, this was a great solution.
Yeah, and I'll file that under the quality of life this game offers compared to others in its category. Again, the other thing being the combat kind of happening all at once, and instead of watching every single animation, every single turn, the catch-up experience system is great because if you come across a character and you do want to use them, you can. And so they thought it out beforehand, and this game just is a lot more playable for new people, I think, compared to some of the more hardcore JRPGs. And there were some hardcore ones that came out on PlayStation 1 that went crazy with mechanics. This one keeps it simple, but did add enough to make it its own thing. That Fire Emblem one being my favorite, I think. But yeah,
If they didn't, this game, it would really hurt this game with the cast of characters. So I think it was almost a necessity.
Yeah. Suikoden 3, Suikoden 4, Suikoden 5 are the other games in this series. I think you've already communicated this, Justified, but out of those 2, is your favorite or is just the best entry in your opinion?
It is my favorite. If you YouTube other people who like the franchise, things like that, most people in that community would agree that 2 is the best and their favorite. A few others would. Some people love the 1 just because it's the original. I personally like 3 a lot. 3 is very strong. And then 5 is kind of it's not the same people who made, because the main guy left after 3. And some people love 5 because 5, it's a lot of ways a throwback to 2. 4 is awful. I would not recommend anyone to play it. It's a botched game. It has the same mechanics. It's just not good.
Well,
wait, it's a potch game?
Potch.
Yeah, there's got to be a reason they call money or potch, but
I don't know either. But that's
here's my theory
name.
on this. So
That's the
if you
worst
ever
name.
play like a Capcom game, I can't give too many examples, but like sometimes they use the same currency in their games. Like Capcom games use
Zenny.
Zenny.
Yeah.
And I played a few RPGs with Capcom, and it's like they still use Zenny. I don't. Now, Konami also has an RPG series called Vandal Hearts for PlayStation 1 2. Those are tactical RPGs. And I can't remember if they use POTS or not. It might be a Japanese thing. I'm not sure.
it might. Yeah,
It's probably
I
a
was hoping it would be a
thing, but I hated
Castlevania
it.
reference, but I don't think it is.
there. You mentioned up top, Justified, but there is a spiritual successor, but also a planned HD remaster of the first 2 games. It was set to be released last year. They didn't make the deadline, and so there is no date of release that is announced yet. It is expected to be this year.
But anytime, yeah.
Well,
Yes.
or it
Later.
went into development hell and will never come out.
So
Let's not say that.
yeah, let's not. That'd be horrible. So the main reason I wanted to sponsor is, one, to expose you guys to the community, but I do feel like the series was basically dead until they announced this remaster. So I'm hoping, and it's such a niche, but I think great franchise. So I have been wanting a 6th entry. I would love that. I would jump on it. But I think they're going to really lean, and they said they're open to the idea, but they're going to really lean on the sales for the HD remasters, which, by the way, it's an HD remaster collection of 1 and 2. I hope it comes out this
So
year, and I
great.
will be playing it. And then also, I think they're paying attention to the spiritual successor, because the creator of the franchise, he left after the 3rd game, went to Konami to try to make a 6th game. They said no. So he started making the spiritual successor, which comes out at the end of April. And they might also look to see how well that game does
What's it called? Do you
to
know?
determine if they're going to make a 6th game. And by the way, I cannot pronounce that game. It's like Eiyuden Chronicles.
Oh,
Dustin, maybe
Sounds right to me. I don't
It
know.
kind of lines up with Suikoden, Suikoden,
yeah,
Suikoden.
maybe these games would do better if they had a better Western
Like
name.
Final
I don't know.
Fantasy.
I would imagine that the HD remaster will come out and something will be announced within the next week since we did an episode on it just now.
Yeah.
That's how it works
It-
half the time. Yeah.
Watch. If you want a copy of Suikoden 2 for your PlayStation, this is one of the expensive ones.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised.
It is $125 used or loose.
Wow.
It is $800 if you want it new.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, it's a big
Yeah,
I have
one.
an original copy, fellas. The original
You've got it? Is it in good condition?
Yes.
Nice.
I have all of them, actually, the original copies.
That's fun. That's
That's
really
so
cool.
It's a
fun.
gold mine.
Final thoughts.
At the end of each and every one of our episodes, we give our final summarized thoughts on the game of the week. Justified will allow you to go last, and Kenny, you can start us off.
Yeah, so add this to the list of less popular RPGs, at least in their initial run, that got popular later because of great underlying quality. It was a little bit overlooked initially, I think. I don't think this game, when it first came out, did super well on like the sales front, but it's a unique title. It's gone kind of cult classic. It's grown in popularity and people have understood it. We already pointed out it's made some lists of kind of best RPGs of all time. And I am very glad that we got the chance to introduce ourselves to this title, and I'm glad that it happened with this game specifically. So I had a lot of fun playing it, and I'll play some more.
That's your thoughts. What are Nolan's thoughts?
My thoughts are, I was worried that the game would be the same as the beginning sequence. And many are that. And what I mean is standard JRPG battle, walking around, random encounters, all with a bland story to hold it together. And I realize I'm becoming pretty critical of the JRPG formula, but there are just so many out there that stay there and do that, and people love them. But with the inclusion of the different battle types and like this whole gimmick, I'll call it a gimmick, but I don't mean that negatively, of the 108 characters, it kept me way more engaged and wanting to come back to it than it could have if it would have stayed the same. But like I said, I think that component stresses me out in a JRPG, like it does Dustin and Fire Emblem, and that hyped feeling of, oh, a new guy, like that I get from Final Fantasy, let's say, it eventually becomes redundant here. And there's a side quest associated with it. I'm really torn on I'm so scatterbrained with this game, but I think it's so quality. I think it is so worth playing and worth knowing about because it's not Final Fantasy. It doesn't look like Final Fantasy. It doesn't feel like Final Fantasy or any of the other examples, and I think that's cool. Those are my thoughts.
Nolan, I think it was you that one of you that messaged me earlier this week saying it's so interesting how abundantly clear or whatever that it is not Square.
Game.
That it's a different kind of JRPG, and that is, I agree, refreshing.
Yeah.
I have not experienced a new to me JRPG on this podcast that I enjoyed as much as this one in a very long time.
Wow.
Since Chrono Trigger?
He hates Chrono Trigger.
I don't hate Chrono Trigger.
He's wrong about Chrono Trigger.
That's fair.
I don't.
I forgot he was an outlier here and doesn't know what he's talking about.
I need to go back and revisit it. It's been a long time. Anyways, I will say this: the more that I played it this week, the more that I've fallen for this game. I think one of the things that it does well, the developers intentionally didn't put all their assets into graphics, changing 2D to 3D. Intentionally didn't put it into a few of the new areas that JRPGs were going at this time, and instead put their resources, time, effort, and energy primarily into characters and story. Two elements that that are the most important to me. And
your bread and butter.
They did so well with that. And it's not perfect. Guys, I just fought Dracula for all intents and purposes.
I saw that character.
And I think that that people that love this series, there's a connection to some of the other games there. So it might make a little bit of sense, but in this, it's like a hard left turn. So it's not a perfect game, but take this for what it is, and you can make any kind of inferences that you'd like to out of this, but it will be my last word on the matter. I put in 10 times the amount of time this week into Suikoden II than I did to Final Fantasy VII Rebirth.
Yeah, because I asked you multiple times this week, FF7R question mark? No answer.
And the answer was the answer was either none or Suikoden II.
Yeah, then finally you told me that, and I was like, oh. Wow.
That's high praise.
That is high praise.
Or low praise.
Or mid praise.
To Rebirth, which I'm not saying is that, but yes, much more of my time this week was invested in Suikoden 2, and this, we say it sometimes, oh, hopefully I'll be able to play some more. Kenny gave a little bit, I'll probably play some more, and it doesn't happen. We always have to play other games. I'll finish this game. I swear on the life of my dog.
You swear on the Reverend Mother?
He doesn't have a dog, but it's a good joke anyways.
Justified. Give us your final thoughts.
To add further to the comments you guys already said, I think the one key word, the reason why it's my favorite game of all time, is charm. It's not AAA, but the replay value, the story to me is the benchmark for all stories in JRPGs. I have experienced Chrono Trigger, Secret of Mana, the Breath of Fire series. I mean, I played a good chunk of all the Final Fantasies. I have dived into them, and to me, this franchise is my favorite. I still play 4, even though I insulted it. I still play 4 because it's part of the whole lore. So my goal here is just to expose this game to the community and hope that it eventually brings it back. We've seen so much retro games. Going back to the Fire Emblem. I don't know if you guys ever had a chance to play Ogre Battle. All these games are coming back now in spiritual successors, if not the direct franchises. This one, I'm just holding on and hoping that they make another game. And again, I'm just glad everyone got a chance to play it.
I love Just was on a mission.
For bringing it to us, mission complete.
Yeah.
And those were our thoughts on Suikoden 2. What were your thoughts? Our YouTube community said 42% yes, it's worth playing today. 6% said no, go play something else. 53% have never played it before.
Expected.
Yeah.
It's no Final Fantasy, at least in the States, right?
Is that?
It's not a
Is
household.
that 101%? Is my math off?
You shouldn't be doing math there, but sometimes it is off by 1% just because I don't know why YouTube does that.
Because math.
Rounding errors or whatever.
Many of you played along with us this week, wrote in. Here are a few of your thoughts. Lieutenant Pat X said, my beloved Suikoden 2, I want you to know that you will always hold a special place in my heart. You are more than just a game. You are a cherished memory, a timeless treasure that I will carry with me forever. Thank you for the countless hours of joy and the memories that will last a lifetime. The exceptional music still keeps me company, and beautiful morning always manages to brighten up my day, even in the worst of times. So a love letter. There's a love letter.
Yeah,
I like that.
love
That's
letter.
a fun, different kind of commentary.
Garlisle, on the other hand, said, man, I tried. The sprite works great, the audio is alright, and the story's engaging enough that if I continue, that will be why. It's the gameplay dragging this one down. Not for the usual PS1 era way too slow reasons, but rather it's just shallow. Never mind the genuinely awful strategy segments. The main battle system is just a lot of otherwise fine dressing on a dry core. After 6 hours, there was almost never a moment where I actually felt engaged with combat. Everything either just does damage or heals. And that's all. And that's just not enough for me anymore.
You pissed off, Justified?
I
I might have some more Carlisle afterwards.
We've got he's grumpy old man JRPG Garlisle at this point
I
in
thought
time.
I would have his support. I was more
Yes.
worried about Nolan.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing. Yeah.
There is a kernel of truth to Dustin's like and his dislike that the stronger parts of this game are plot and character and story, I think, than like
It's not for
its battle
everybody.
systems. But I didn't find that they were like not fun still.
Yeah.
I still enjoyed them.
Yeah.
Hey,
So,
by the way,
interesting.
before we move on, is that Fire Emblem battle mechanic in the rest of the series? And is it better?
Sort of. It's very different. The first game is more of just simply a rock, paper, scissors. You just have two armies,
Yeah.
opposite sides, rock, paper, scissors. The third one, it's like you're moving units, but the third one's interesting because the way you have your runes and your equipment and their levels, and they add a little bit more, like you can upgrade skills, which update the gameplay. But then when you have a major battle, those characters, the way you level them up, influence the battle, which makes the battle mechanic easier. In other words,
That's
in this
nice.
game, you can have one character that's level 10 that you've never used, one character that's level 50, but in the major battles, it's irrelevant. They have the same value. In the other games, they bring some of that
It has outcome.
into, And then the fifth game
Yeah.
is like the Fire Emblem, but the characters actually move across the battlefield in real time, and you can kind of pause. It's almost like a real-time strategy game a little bit. So each game, it does a little bit of a different spin, but they do have them all in every game to answer your question.
One last comment. Levi said, my dear friend Pavi always suggested this game to me, and it took way too long for me to try it out. With it being the pick of the week, I was very excited to dive back in. The battle system and huge cast of characters makes me always want to keep seeing what the next few hours of gameplay will hold. I usually don't like this style of RPG, but the movement and fights and art style keep it very engaging. The only thing I don't like is how long it took me to take my friend's advice and play it. This title always keeps me coming back. It's NGP for me all day.
Real ones know what's up.
For now, we're going to set aside Suikoden 2, and we are going to randomly select the next game from our retro master list. 15 years old or older, any console, any genre. Randomizing now. What do y'all think about sports?
I like basketball.
That's a weird take. This one is not basketball, nor is it football, nor is it ice hockey. We are going to be playing a sports video game that involves skateboarding.
X Games, no?
And it is not Honey Talk
not-
Pro
Oh.
Skater.
Okay.
Okay.
It is a game that is based on an animated sitcom released for the PlayStation 2 in 2002, developed by the Code Monkeys, published by EA. And EA Fox Interactive. Are those two different? Yeah, and Fox Interactive. The game that we're going to be playing for the next 7 days is The Simpsons Skateboarding.
I knew it. I knew it was going to be
Is this our
Simpsons.
second Simpsons?
Third.
Third.
Yeah. We played Hit and Run. We played Bart Juggernauts. And now Bart is on a skateboard.
Yeah, well,
or on his skateboard.
hopefully it's Bart, because I don't think his father would do well on a skateboard.
No. I'm kind of excited. Honestly, sometimes these, like, especially Simpsons, those games could be like randomly so fun.
I guess. This is a hard tonal shift from Suikoden
It
2 to
is.
The Simpsons skateboarding this week. Justified, I'm assuming the answer is no. Have you ever played this game?
I am familiar with most of the Simpsons games. I've never heard of this one.
I don't either.
I
Well,
think you guys
is it a
are-
Tony Hawk
good
like
luck.
clone-ish? It's trying to be Tony
I
Hawk?
would assume. I'd assume it was like
Yeah.
those titles
Yeah.
got big and they were like, we'll do one in that vein and make it fun and silly and animated and
Alright.
just, kind of milk it. But that can sometimes work. So we'll see.
Find a copy, play it along with us this week. The Simpsons Skateboarding. Bad name.
Yeah, terrible name.
Join us in Discord, please. Discord.gg/newgameplus. Atreides.
We want to say thank you to those of you who hop on patreon.com and support your favorite retro gaming podcast. This one. Especially our large list of producer level supporters, including Alex, Alias X, Amarlian, Antonin, Arlen, Yuki, Ben, Craig, Dustin's 5 o'clock, Shadow, Garlisle, Hallex, Harold, J. Robert, Jake, Jared, Joey, Jordan, Justin, Kenny's Beard, Clint, Corey, Levi, Maxima, Megatroid, Miss Buzo, Not Enough Dog, Riff, Sajin, Shane, Shauna, Steven Fox, Psychomantis, Thomas Turtle, Unbedavable, and Zion. And of course, a huge shout out to our director level supporters who go truly above and beyond. Bro Jim, Super Hyper, The Kentucky Kid, Siegfried, Smashing Bricks, Retro Gaming Podcast, and of course, this week, most specifically, Justified. Thank you for coming, for being a director, for supporting the show, for sharing a great new sort of series to put on our radar that we hadn't had before, and for just putting up with all the shenanigans. We're so glad to have you around and have you be on the show this morning.
Thank you.
Justified, if you want them to find you, where would you want people to find you online?
I'm not really a social media person, so you won't find me.
I love it.
Nice.
I love it. I'm not either.
You can find us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, TikTok, and YouTube. Links are in the show notes. Listen directly on any podcast provider of your choice. Make sure you subscribe so that you are the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a kind rating and review. Our episode artwork was created by Dave. Our video episode was edited by our friend Dylan. Our audio episode was edited and produced by our friend Dan Willett. Join us next week as we play The Simpsons Skateboarding. Until then, I'm Joey Atreides.
I'm also an Atreides, but whichever one Nolan thinks he is.
I'm Duncan, Idaho.
And who are you, Justified?
Luca Blight.
Ooh. And this has been New Game Plus.